This month's Blitz Bass comes with a new premium destroyer. Tier 8 British destroyer called Eskimo. Let's take a look at the history of this very important and highly accomplished special ship and try to find its place in the game. Better get started. The Eskimo destroyer is referred to as the travel class. There are many travel class destroyers in the Blitz game. Tier 9 Cossack, Tier 7 Huron, Tier 10 Vampire 2 are some examples. Let's first talk a little bit about the travel class, and then talk specifically about the Eskimo. The London Naval Treaty of 1930 origin of the super destroyer when the tribals were conceived in the mid-1930s, naval construction was limited by a series of naval armament treaties. Japanese navies did not have the pressures and, unlike the Admiralty, afford to focus their ships solely on fighting a Pacific war. The Navy might fight in the Pacific, Atlantic, and Indian Oceans, or the Mediterranean Sea, anywhere or everywhere else, and they had to serve and protect a global empire. The Navy has a cruiser gap, and travel-class destroyers were designed to fulfill this gap. The travel-class design was to be a balance, a compromise between these two roles. Their guns would be the core of their armament and their fighting capability, unlike any other destroyer then in British service. The tribal class were always intended to be something more than simple larger destroyers, taking up specific roles in fleet and aircraft carrier operations, as well as fulfilling detached missions as cruiser substitutes. The tribal class were conceived and designed, in part, for the fleet cruiser role. The tribal class destroyer were treated as an elite group. This was a conscious attempt to retain their offensive nature in the face of their less traditionally offensive destroyer form, through the encouragement and generation of spirit. This aim was helped by the fact that their design, despite not being traditional destroyer, was very striking. The 12 Royal Navy tribals sunk were all lost in the war's most desperate days between 1940 and 1942. They were hard-fighting ships, and in a strange way, the losses were due to them being such good ships. As a well-balanced, capable design, manned by personnel who considered themselves an elite coterie in the traditions of the Royal Navy, destroyer crews considered themselves far more select than those of the battleships. The tribal-class destroyers, a class specifically intended as general-purpose ships able to undertake both cruiser and destroyer duties. Although not as good as purpose-built vessels for specialist roles, they were designed to be good enough and as such provide much of the required capability where and when needed. Tribal-class destroyers has power and majesty and beauty. But why the Royal Navy named them with different tribes? Considered in terms of a broader strategy, any positive feelings generated, either amongst British people for empire or amongst the subjects for British rule, would help in lessening the risk of complications caused by disunity. These new names to the fore and demonstrate the changing perspectives on the empire. Partly as a way to confuse enemies, and partly as a way of reshaping the fleet, Eskimo changed designator letter for her pennant twice in her career. She entered serves as L75, then became F75, and finally served out the remainder of her career as G75. Eskimo with her final pennant number clearly visible. Eskimo was Lucky Star. She had a long war. Eskimo had joined 6th Destroyer Flotilla, the home fleet tribal destroyer flotilla. By highlighting the strength of the fleet, the Navy tried to buy time for diplomacy. Following this, her high level of activity continued unabated. All the 3 Narvik battles were close-range destroyer fights, and the difficulty for the Germans was that these were the fights for which the tribal class had been built. Eskimo was to the fore, and exposed as she was lost her whole bow forward of bemount. Nonetheless, she kept on fighting. Not only did she lose her bow at Narvik, but she lost it for a second time later in the war in a collision with Javelin in the Bismarck Chase, and received major bomb damage in 1943. Eskimo played a significant part in many actions including Operation Torch, Operation Husky, and Operation Neptune. On the Second Battle of Narvik, Eskimo's role for which her class had been built, providing cover to allow the conventional torpedo destroyers to get closer to the enemy. The torpedo struck to Eskimo was taking off with one blow Eskimo's bow section. Eskimo did not stop. She completed her turn, fired her torpedo, and the beam mounting continued firing until the ammunition ran out. She could get home. Thus ended Narvik, one of the most notable destroyer actions of the early part of the war. This was a spirit of resilience, persistence, and leadership over and above what duty expected. It was a spirit which was the hallmark of the class's service, and which was a constant theme of Eskimo's career and a proof of the tribal class design's versatility. There are currently 4 Tier 8 British destroyers in Blitz. Lightning, which you can get for free in the tech tree. Black Lightning, which you can get with special events. Cossack and now Eskimo, Lightning, and Black Lightning are L-class variant ships. However, Cossack is a tribal class destroyer in Tier 8. Although these 4 destroyers are basically similar to each other, there are important differences between them. First of all, let's say this. All 3 are very effective and powerful destroyers, and they clearly reflect the British destroyer features and play style in Blitz. I just told you about the historical mission of the tribal class. Although we cannot think of it as a cruiser substitute in the game, Tribal appears as a strong and aggressive class with powerful guns compared to the standard tech tree British destroyers. These destroyers show themselves with their hybrid capabilities, but the gunboat personalities of the Tribal ones are a little more prominent. In exchange for good weapons, their torpedo capabilities are reduced. A destroyer with fewer torpedoes will always have lower instantaneous strike power. This is not only valid for Cossack and Eskimo, but also for other destroyers of this type. However, we should not forget this here. The number of torpedoes is low, but its range is quite good. Eskimo is definitely a more talented and powerful Cossack. Let's ask the question in mind, is Eskimo worth it? If you're playing a destroyer at Tier 8, I think it is worth it with Eskimo. We get better damage reduction and torpedo damage reduction. Also, stronger main guns come with a slightly longer reload time, but the setting fire chance rate increases by 1%, and the torpedo flood probability is again 1% higher when compared to Cossack. I think the difference in capability between Cossack and Eskimo is not small. Eskimo is worth buying. It is currently the best British Tier 8 destroyer along with Black Lightning. Rapid Reload 2 is a very good feature for a destroyer of this tier. Among all the British destroyers, Eskimo comes with fuel smoke level to skill. Although it is less in number, it is a more effective smoke feature. So if you enjoy playing with Cossack, Eskimo will show itself as a better ship for you. Tier 8 tribal destroyers like Cossack and Eskimo do not have torpedo boat feature. Do not expect to use them with sudden and devastating torpedo attacks with concealment feature like Amatsukaze Kajero. These are ships that capture areas, spot enemy ships in lava environments, and are suitable for 1v1 dogfights with enemy destroyers. Although they do not have as strong main guns as German destroyers, they have similar values. However, thanks to their maneuverability and agility, they can dodge many salvos and torpedoes. They can get away from the environment for a short time thanks to their fuel smoke. Since Commander Triangulum gives one extra rapid reload, I wanted to use this Commander on Eskimo. It is also a silver Commander that boosts smoke features, as you can see on the screen. I think it suits Eskimo.
戦闘配備火器管制追尾システムオンライン敵艦を捕捉距離はまだ遠いみたい敵艦の走行を貫通敵艦にダメージを与えたこの調子重力子エンジンリミッター解除緊急出力目標への命中を確認敵艦の走行を貫通した敵艦にダメージを与えたこの調子目標への命中を確認敵艦の走行を貫通敵艦の走行を貫通した敵艦の走行を貫通重力子エンジンリミッター解除緊急出力敵艦にダメージを与えたこの調子目標への命中を確認敵艦にダメージを与えたこの調子敵艦の走行を貫通 勝利は目前。目標への命中を確認。敵艦の走行を貫通した。ありがとう。協力に感謝する。敵艦の走行を貫通。ありがとう。協力に感謝する。